Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about assistance lifts as a form of progressive overload by adding volume. Because it's one of those things that comes up a lot. People always want to know about accessory exercises, assistance lifts, things like that. And it doesn't matter what your overall goals all are because we know that size and strength are correlated with each other. You can skew your training a bit in one direction over the other, but you can't get stronger without adding muscle mass outside of maybe some initial neural gains the first couple weeks you do any new exercise. And you can't gain muscle without creating more strength potential in the muscle. Like I said, we can skew the ratios, but they're connected together ultimately. And what it comes down to is we talk oftentimes about assistance exercises to bring up weak points in an exercise and all of that. But the reality is that really isn't the point, because here's the thing. If you just trained with more volume or more intensity or more workload on the big basic exercise, I don't care if it's a bench press, a floor press, back squat, high bar, low bar squat, sumo deadlift, conventional deadlift, it doesn't matter. All the muscles involved are going to grow. All the muscles involved are going to grow. And you're always going to have a weak link in it. Whatever your weak link is in that exercise is probably always going to be your weak link in that exercise, even if you bring it up with some hypertrophy. That's just the nature of the beast. It's just the nature of the beast. You're always going to have a weak link in there. And everything will get bigger and stronger as you increase workload on the exercise. The problem we run into is sometimes it's an issue of overuse, but more than anything, it's an issue of overtraining. It's an issue of maximum recoverable volume. Perfect exercise like the deadlift, which you guys see me doing right there. It's really hard on your body to deadlift with any amount of volume. It's an extremely difficult exercise to recover from. In fact, the back squat can be a very difficult exercise to recover from. Not so much as the deadlift, but they beat your recovery up, and that's the unfortunate nature of big exercises. We have a finite amount of recovery we can handle from the big exercises. Now, the difference between an assistance lift and an accessory lift is that an accessory lift could be anything that brings up any of the muscles involved or a weak link in the muscle involved. An assistance lift is one that provides neural carryover because it utilizes a similar motor pattern. For example, the sumo deadlift and the conventional deadlift could be assistance lifts for each other. Any form of squat is an assistance lift for the back squat. Any form of chest press that uses even a remotely similar bar path to your bench press is an assistance lift for your bench press. Right? They're assistance lifts because they share enough motor pattern involvement that the actual strength carryover is there. An accessory lift just brings up muscles that are involved. In other words, a tricep extension could improve your bench press in theory because it adds more meat to your triceps. Right? A fly could add more meat to your pecs and give you a little more power out of the bottom of a bench because your pectorals grow. Whereas in a floor press is an assistance exercise. It has a similar bar path. It has carryover in terms of the neural components. So here's the thing that we look at. Oftentimes we are training near our maximum recoverable volume on any big exercise. And I mean, this is something I'm having to do right now. I just had a deload week last week, and I've come back and started PRing again on my own concurrent training. I deloaded my two biggest lifts, my squat and my deadlift. But what I had been doing in the previous weeks had been increasing volume because my volume is constant on those. I build to a relatively heavy triple on certain days, and then I do volume triples on other days and slowly increase the weight. My volume increases are pretty constant on those because they're just based upon weight on the bar. Whereas I've been adding accessory movements, and that's the accessory for me for those two lifts tends to be things like barbell rows, power cleans, right? The power clean is going to be an assistance lift for both of those to some extent. It's an accessory and an assistance, so I've added volume on the power cleans right up until the point where I started almost overreaching and needed to back down. And then I cut the accessory back out, and I'll probably do that and ramp it back up. And that's one of the things that we can do with assistance lifts. Assistance lifts are usually easier to recover from than the primary exercise. For example, if you're on a set amount of volume and workload on your barbell squat, but you know Your quads need more work, right? You want bigger quads, and you know you need more volume in your quads to hypertrophy them more. You could start adding front squats in as an assistance lift. And because if you're a somewhat advanced lifter, you're not going to be adding significant amounts of weight or volume to your back squat in any given phase most of the time, particularly depending on what sort of training you're doing, depending on what your periodization or program looks like. But you could add volume on the front squat, couldn't you? Why? Because it's easier to recover from. Most people's front squat max is about 85% of their back squat, whether it's a 1 rep max or a 5 rep max, about 85%. So it also has less axial loading. It's easier on the body because you move a lighter weight through the same range of motion with similar amounts of muscle activation. It's overall easier to recover from. You could add volume on the front squat every single week, right? And you could use that to push yourself closer to an overreaching phase without overtraining quite as easily, because it's easier to recover from than the back squat. You could do the same thing with the power clean or whatever. But a front squat's a great example. You can take an accessory lift and you can add volume on that because that volume is easier to recover from. And because it's a squat, it's going to have carryover. It's an assistance lift to the back squat. It also happens to be an accessory lift for the deadlift because it hypertrophies some of the oftentimes weak points in the deadlift. Things like the thoracic erectors get worked very effectively on the front squat. So again, it's an exercise and it works several muscles involved, but it would be considered an assistance lift for the deadlift. Same thing, let's say you're reaching the most volume you could really handle on deadlifts, but you need to add more volume to hypertrophy some of the muscles involved, maybe the hamstrings and glutes. You could use a Romanian deadlift. You can handle a higher volume of Romanian deadlifts than you can conventional deadlifts. They're not going to make you as strong, but you could ramp up that volume over the course of several weeks. You could add reps, you could add sets. You could increase volume on a Romanian deadlift as an assistance lift for your deadlift without overreaching quite as easily. And you can progress with that. In other words, progressive overload isn't just about weight on the bar, it's about adding volume. And if we add volume on an assistance lift that has carryover to our main lift, we are, number one, increasing hypertrophy through the extra volume. Well, that hypertrophy is going to give you more strength potential. And because we're doing a similar motor pattern, we will get some neural efficiency carryover, right? Because the motor pattern is similar enough, there will be some transfer of the motor unit learning. I mean, a Romanian deadlift will help a little bit with a conventional deadlift. Same thing, a front squat, getting stronger on the front squat will help with the back squat. Not as much as getting stronger, adding more back squat work will, but because they're easier to recover from, we can use it that way. We can use assistance lifts as a form of progressive volume overload for both purposes of hypertrophy and strength carryover on the motor patterns of a main lift. But again, that's just one way to use them. That's usually the best way to use them, in my opinion, because it will allow us to, over the course of time, increase volume and further approach our maximum recoverable volume and maybe ease past it at a certain point before we deload. Then we can deload. We can cut the assistance lifts back out, get stronger on the main lifts, and if the main lifts start to slow down or stall just a little bit, and we can't increase volume further on those, we can add an assistance lift back in, slowly increase the volume on that, and get bigger and stronger. And I think that's really my opinion. The philosophy I'm approaching these days is that that really is the best way to do assistance work, is to use it purely as an additional volume tool with carryover. And I think assistance compounds are the way to go. More and more, as I look at the studies, I look at observation, I think more and more isolation movements are, for the most part, 90% useless. And I know that's blasphemy to say. I'm not saying don't do some curls if you think that your biceps need to get bigger. You want to do curls, do some curls. That's fine. But don't expect them to be game changers. Not to the same degree of what you're going to get away with getting bigger or stronger on a big compound movement. Isolation work is refinement work for the most part. It's not going to be ever going to be a game changer. And that's just the opinion that I've arrived at after decades of observing people in the gym, watching studies. And I think assistance work really is the way forward to maximizing size and strength when you need to increase volume without overtraining. And again, it can be used as a very, very valuable tool for that. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.